Clay Electric Cooperative, Inc., Global Harmonization System, Global Harmonization System, GHS. OSHA 29, CFR 1200. The Hazard Communication Standard, or Hazcom, was revised in 2012. The previous Hazard Communication Standard was referred to as Right to Know. The revised Global Harmonization System is referred to as Right to Understand. The goal of incorporating the GHS system into Hazcom is to standardize chemical hazard communication worldwide. GHS required training. The Hazcom revision required a new label and new safety data sheet, or SDS. It was formerly known as MSDS. OSHA specifies that employers must provide training on this approach to help ensure that workers can access and use the information on the labels and SDSSs effectively. Employees must be trained on label elements and the safety data sheet format. Other GHS factors. Labels and SDSSs are required to be provided by all manufacturers and importers for all hazardous chemicals. Employers must make necessary adjustments to their workplace programs when any new hazards are identified while following the GHS guidelines. GHS labels. Labels with the required information are the immediate source of information on any hazardous chemical in the workplace. Labels must be present on all shipped containers of all hazardous chemicals. All suppliers have the same label requirements, so labels should be consistent in the approach of providing required information by the use of label elements. Label elements. Labels on shipped containers must include product identifier, signal word, pictogram, hazard statements, precautionary statements, supplier identification such as name, address, and phone number. HCS Signal Word. Signal word means a word used to indicate the relative level of severity of the hazard and alert the reader to a potential hazard on the label. The signal words used in this section are danger and warning. Danger is used for the more severe hazards, while warning is used for the less severe. HCS pictograms. 8 pictograms are designated under this standard for application to a hazard category. You will find one of the pictograms above on the label of any hazardous chemical. Notice each pictogram represents a hazard or list of hazards depending on what the chemical contains. It is best to become familiar with each of these pictograms and the hazards associated with each. Hazard statement. Hazard statement means a statement assigned to a hazard class and category that describes the nature of the hazards of a chemical, including, where appropriate, the degree of a hazard. Example: fatal if swallowed, acute oral toxicity. Precautionary statement. Precautionary statement means a phrase that describes recommended measures that should be taken to minimize or prevent adverse effects resulting from exposure to a hazardous chemical or improper storage or handling. Example: do not eat, drink, or smoke when using this product. GHS labels. Continued. Workplace labeling. There is no change to general workplace labeling requirements. HMIS labels and NFPA ratings by themselves are not sufficient for workplace labels. NFPA rating systems are used for emergency response. NFPA rating. Here is an example of an NFPA rating. As you can see, this is a lot to remember and become familiar with. The diamond-shaped representation in the middle would be your only information if this were the primary label used on the chemical. You would have to be familiar with what each number and description means in each color in order to know what the hazards are. Although you may see this rating on some chemicals, it is not sufficient to be used on its own. HMIS label. Here is an example of an HMIS label. On this label, there will be a number in the box beside health, flammability, and reactivity. In the box beside personal protection, there will be a letter. In order to know which hazards are available and PPE needed for a chemical with this label, you would need to consult the HMIS Hazard and PPE Index. HMIS label information. Here is a look at the index. To obtain the information you need, you must use the number provided in the boxes and match them with the numbers on the index to determine the hazard. It works the same way for the PPE. You must take the letter provided in the PPE box and match it with the letter in the index to determine the PPE needed to use the chemical. As you can see, neither of these labels provide you with an immediate source of information. Either or both of these may be used in addition to a GHS label or SDS, but neither is sufficient to be used alone. GHS Label Example. Here is an example of the GHS label. This should be the label that you see on any hazardous chemical currently in use in the workplace. Notice the product identification at the top, followed by the pictograms, then signal word, hazard statement, precautionary statement, and other helpful information. Toward the bottom are first aid and firefighting measures, helpful information in case an accident were to occur. Lastly, at the bottom is the supplier's information. Again, this is the user's immediate source of information when using the product. We will now discuss the GHS Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. GHS Safety Data Sheet, SDS. The Safety Data Sheet, or SDS, is the detailed source of information about the chemical. SDSSs are organized using a specified order of information. The required information will appear in the same sections of any SDS, regardless of the supplier. The most important information will be listed in the first sections of the SDS. SDS sections. 1. Identification. 2. Hazard identification. 3. Composition or information on ingredients. 4. First aid measures. 5. Firefighting measures. 6. Accidental release measures. 7. Handling and storage. 8. Exposure control and personal protection. 9. Physical and chemical properties. 10. Stability and reactivity. 11. Toxicological information. 12. Ecological information. 13. Disposal considerations. 14. Transport information. 15. Regulatory information. 16. Other information. Examples of new format SDS. Here is an example of the first page of an SDS which covers the first two sections: identification of the product, company, and the hazards associated with the chemical. SDS Access. Updated SDSSs had to be provided with all products shipped after June 1, 2015. SDSSs must be readily accessible to workers when they are in their work areas during each work shift. SDSSs are available and can be accessed by employees in their work area on ClayNet. SDSS Access. On ClayNet, go to Departments and Districts, Human Resources, Safety and Training, MSDS Online. Slide 22, MSDS Online. Search. This is what the home page will look like once you have accessed the website. There are 3 options for finding an SDS for the chemical you're using or to which you are otherwise exposed. MSDS Search. By using the search bar at the top, you can simply provide the name of the chemical and the choices will appear for every chemical in the database by that name. MSDS Search. Another way to access an SDS is to select the first letter of the chemical name. Once you have done so, a complete list of every chemical in the database with that first letter will be available. Lastly, you can select All Products. Once you have done so, the list of all chemicals in our database will be available for you to scroll through. All Products. No matter which search method you choose to use, this is how the list will appear once you have reached the product of choice. To access the SDS for that product, select the PDF icon labeled GHS Plus to the left of the product name. 3M Safety Data Sheet. Once you have selected the icon, the complete SDS for that product will appear for your review. Simply scroll through the pages of the SDS until you find the information needed. If you should experience any problems with this program or locating the information needed, please contact the Safety and Training Department for assistance. CEC Red Book Procedure 0331. Updated Hazcom webpage. For more information regarding the Global Harmonization System and Hazard Communication Standard, visit OSHA's Hazard Communication webpage.